Hello, I'm Robert Bensley, and I would like to share with you a poster of a project that we engaged with that looked at factors associated with wichealth.org user engagement with COVID-19 resources. Wichealth.org is an online nutrition education platform that delivers nutrition education and parent-child feeding to 34 states and Indian tribal organizations across the country. It is part of the secondary contact aspect associated with the WIC program, and we have over 1 million users per year that are accessing this site for their education. At the start of COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to deliver resources to our clients that we serve that relate to COVID-19 related concerns. And we were finding that by the third week in March, clients, when they completed their end of lesson survey, they were leaving comments and questions in relation to COVID related issues. And so what we did is we developed 4 different resources that we delivered onto the main dashboard of their login site that related to issues associated with shopping and cooking meals, etc., at the start of the pandemic. So over the course of 3 months, April, May, and June, we kept these resources available for our clients to access. And during that time, we had nearly 6,000 accesses of the resources. So we wanted to analyze those resources in relation to who was viewing them, what were some of the characteristics of the individuals that were viewing them in relation to those who weren't viewing them. And so our poster describes that. So what I'd like to do here is I'm going to zoom in on a main table. And the main table here is looking at the different resources that we had and the access from the different types of populations that we were studying. So our populations of study were the percent of individuals who are Spanish speaking, the percent who identified themselves as Latino or Latina ethnicity, the percent that were identified as Black race, the percent who were new users to the site, and the percent who identified themselves as pregnant. And our shopping resources focused on shopping tips in case of COVID-19 shortages, meal planning during COVID-19, sources you can trust for current COVID information, and COVID-19 guidance in relation to feeding your baby. And if you remember, this was at the start of the pandemic. And so there were lots of questions about how do I cook meals? Where do I get PPE, hand sanitizer? What should I be buying for foods? How much do I need to bulk up on and stock up on? Because we didn't know a lot in relation to how long this pandemic was going to last. At the same time, there was all sorts of information out there that related to everybody being an expert in terms of what COVID meant and what you should do with it, et cetera. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. So with our 4 different resources that we had on the dashboard, the shopping tips in case of COVID-19 shortages was by far the largest, with over 2,300 accesses of that, compared to 1,000 to 1,200 with the other ones. So when we started to take a look at our different populations in terms of who is accessing them, and I'm going to move my screen over here. So now we can take a look at the table. You can take a look at, you can see here our 5 different categories of population: Spanish speaking, Latino, Black race, new user, and pregnancy. The orange bar is the number of individuals accessing the site that identified themselves in one of those categories. So for instance, 37% of the population that came in and completed a WIC Health lesson during those 3 months considered themselves, or they were new users. 25.7% identified as being pregnant. So those are the orange bars. The blue bars is the percentage that access the COVID resources that are from those categories. So you can see here that the Spanish language, Latino ethnicity, and pregnancy were all higher, so that more of the resources were being accessed by those 3 populations as compared to Black and new user, which actually saw less access of those resources. And these were all significantly different at the 0.001 level. So we're finding here that those who basically Latino and Spanish speaking especially had a high degree of interest in relation to these resources. Our resources were in both English and Spanish. And so they had great interest in that. Pregnant women had a 13% more interest in relation to accessing those materials as well. And so that would, in our mind, make sense because you're pregnant, you have a new child, we have this new pandemic, we don't know what it's going to do. And so, how can I protect myself? So, those were the findings that we had in relation to this project. What is interesting about this project is that it really identifies the need for instant, credible information being delivered to populations right at the start of some sort of epidemic or issue or pandemic or whatever it might be. So having emergency response resources immediately available helps to alleviate individuals in terms of what they're looking for. And with WIC, especially with populations that are pregnant, Spanish speaking, or identified as Latino. So I hope you gathered something from this. If you have a chance, you can look through this poster and read the information more in depth. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have. If you want to contact me, my email is bensley, which is my last name, at wmich.edu. Thank you and have a great day, and I hope you've enjoyed the conference.